They cheered for him every night. Standing ovations, thunderous applause, demands for encore after encore. Sammy Davis Jr. was the king of Las Vegas entertainment, the man who could make any audience forget their troubles and believe in magic. But on July 18, 1961, at 2:47 p.m. on a blazing hot afternoon, America's most beloved entertainer discovered that talent meant nothing when the show was over, and the pool was white only. What happened next wasn't just a moment of personal humiliation. It was the beginning of a revolution that would tear down the walls of segregation in the entertainment capital of the world. And it started with one simple act of defiance that sent shockwaves through every hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. Sammy Davis Jr. jumped into a swimming pool. And the world never looked at Las Vegas the same way again. To understand the magnitude of what Sammy did that day, you have to understand Las Vegas in 1961. Forget the glittering images you've seen in movies. Behind the neon lights and flowing cocktails was a city divided by an invisible but absolute color line. Las Vegas was two cities. There was the Strip, the gleaming hotels, the world-class entertainment, the luxury and glamour that attracted celebrities and high rollers from around the world. And then there was the West Side, a segregated ghetto where black performers were forced to live, eat, and sleep after entertaining white audiences who would never accept them as equals. The system was as rigid as any Jim Crow law in the South. Black entertainers could perform on the Strip stages, but they couldn't eat in its restaurants, drink in its bars, or sleep in its hotels. After every show, while their white co-stars celebrated in luxury suites, black performers had to drive across town to cramped boarding houses and rundown motels. Most humiliating of all, they couldn't use the pools, beaches, or recreational facilities at the hotels where they performed. They could entertain rich white people, but they couldn't swim in the same water. The Flamingo Hotel was the crown jewel of the Strip in 1961. Built by mobster Bugsy Siegel and run by his successors, it was the epitome of Las Vegas glamour. The Flamingo's Copa Room hosted the biggest names in entertainment. Its restaurants served movie stars and millionaires. Its pool was a paradise of palm trees, cabanas, and crystal-clear water where the beautiful people came to see and be seen. Sammy Davis Jr. had been performing at the Flamingo for 5 years. He sold out every show, generated millions in revenue, and was arguably the hotel's biggest draw. But he had never once been allowed to use the pool. July 18, 1961 was a Tuesday. Sammy had performed 2 shows the night before to packed audiences. The reviews were ecstatic. The standing ovations lasted 10 minutes. He was at the peak of his career, beloved by fans of all colors, respected by his peers, rich and famous beyond his childhood dreams. But when he woke up in his suite at the Flamingo, a privilege he'd only recently been granted after years of fighting, and looked out at the pool sparkling in the desert sun, he was still just another black man in a white world. The temperature that day hit 115 degrees, the kind of heat that makes the pavement shimmer like water, that makes your clothes stick to your skin the moment you step outside. Sammy had been rehearsing for a new show, working under hot stage lights for 3 hours. He was exhausted, soaked in sweat, desperate for relief. The pool was 20 floors below his window, cool, inviting, practically empty except for a few white guests lounging in the shade. It would have been the most natural thing in the world for any other guest at the Flamingo to take a swim, but Sammy Davis Jr. wasn't any other guest. For 20 minutes, Sammy stood at his window looking down at that pool. He thought about all the times he'd been turned away from pools, beaches, restaurants. All the times he'd smiled and accepted humiliation because challenging the system meant losing everything. He thought about the thousands of black children across America who looked up to him, who saw him as proof that talent could overcome prejudice. What kind of example was he setting by accepting inequality? And he thought about the white guests around that pool, some of whom had probably cheered for him just hours earlier. They could enjoy every amenity the hotel offered. Why couldn't he? At 2:45 p.m., Sammy Davis Jr. made a decision that would change his life and the history of Las Vegas. He put on his swimming trunks, grabbed a towel, and headed for the elevator. The pool area at the Flamingo was like a scene from a movie. Perfect blue water surrounded by lounge chairs and umbrellas, palm trees swaying in the breeze. A few white guests reading magazines and sipping cocktails, the kind of paradise that was supposed to be available to anyone who could afford it. Except it wasn't available to everyone. Sammy walked through the pool area with his head held high. Some guests looked up from their magazines. A few recognized him and pointed, but no one said anything as he approached the edge of the pool. For a moment, Sammy hesitated. Once he got in that water, there would be no going back. The hotel would be forced to choose, accept integration or ban their biggest star. Then Sammy thought about his father, who had spent his life accepting humiliation to survive. He thought about all the black performers who had come before him, who had swallowed their pride and accepted scraps because they had no choice. And he jumped. The moment Sammy Davis Jr. hit that water, everything changed. The white guests around the pool went silent. Some stared in shock. Others quickly gathered their things and left. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Sammy swam a few laps, casually, as if he belonged there. Which, of course, he did. He had paid for a suite at the hotel. He was generating millions in revenue. He had every right to use the facilities. But right and reality were two different things in 1961 Las Vegas. Within 10 minutes, hotel security appeared. Not to remove Sammy. They wouldn't dare create a scene with their star performer, but to monitor the situation. Pool attendants hovered nervously. Word spread quickly through the hotel that Sammy Davis Jr. was in the pool. Sammy stayed in the water for exactly 30 minutes. Long enough to make his point, not long enough to force a confrontation. When he climbed out, dried off, and walked back to his suite, he left behind more than just pool water dripping on the concrete. He left behind the old rules of Las Vegas. What happened next was swift and shameful. Within an hour of Sammy leaving the pool, hotel maintenance crews appeared with pumps and hoses. They drained every drop of water from the pool, scrubbed it with industrial cleaners, and refilled it with fresh water. The message was clear. Sammy Davis Jr. might be the hotel's biggest star, but his presence had contaminated the pool. The water that had touched his black skin was unfit for white guests. News of the pool draining spread through Las Vegas like wildfire. Other black entertainers were outraged. White liberals were embarrassed. The national press picked up the story, turning it into a symbol of the absurdity and cruelty of segregation. But the most important reaction came from Sammy himself. Instead of accepting the humiliation quietly, as he had so many times before, Sammy decided to fight back. The next day, July 19th, Sammy held a press conference. Standing in front of the Flamingo Hotel, with the refilled pool visible behind him, he delivered a statement that would echo through the civil rights movement. Yesterday, I took a swim in a pool at a hotel where I've been performing for 5 years. Today, that pool has been drained and refilled because a black man's body touched the water. I want America to think about that. I want you to think about a country where a man can entertain you, make you laugh, make you cry, make you believe in dreams, but his skin is considered so dirty that water has to be thrown away after he touches it. The press conference was covered by every major newspaper in America. The images of Sammy standing in front of the drained pool became iconic symbols of the civil rights struggle. But Sammy wasn't finished. Over the next 6 months, he launched a quiet but determined campaign to integrate Las Vegas hotels. He used his star power as leverage, threatening to cancel shows if hotels didn't change their policies. The strategy was brilliant and risky. Sammy was betting his career on the principle that his value as an entertainer was greater than the hotel owner's commitment to segregation. It worked. By December 1961, the major hotels on the Las Vegas Strip had quietly abandoned their segregation policies. Not because they had suddenly become enlightened, but because they couldn't afford to lose Sammy Davis Jr. The change wasn't immediate or complete. Old attitudes died hard, and many white guests continued to treat black performers with hostility. But the official barriers were coming down, one pool at a time. Other black entertainers followed Sammy's lead. Nat King Cole started staying at previously white-only hotels. Lena Horne demanded equal treatment at the venues where she performed. A new generation of black artists refused to accept the second-class status that had been forced on their predecessors. The pool incident at the Flamingo became a turning point in the civil rights movement, not just because of what Sammy did, but because of how he did it. He didn't organize protests or give angry speeches. He simply insisted on being treated as an equal human being. And when the hotel's response exposed the absurdity and cruelty of segregation, Sammy used his platform to force America to confront its own hypocrisy. Years later, Sammy would say that jumping into that pool was the most important thing he ever did. More important than any song he sang, any movie he made, any award he won. "I realized that day that talent without dignity is worthless," Sammy said in a 1975 interview. "People can applaud you all night long, but if they won't let you swim in their pool, then the applause doesn't mean anything." The hotel industry tried to minimize the significance of what happened. They claimed the policy changes were always planned, that segregation was ending naturally, but everyone knew the truth. Sammy Davis Jr. had forced their hand by refusing to accept humiliation quietly. The pool at the Flamingo Hotel became a symbol of change. Black families began visiting Las Vegas for vacation, not just to see shows. Black entertainers started bringing their families, knowing they could all stay together in the same hotel. Most importantly, the next generation of black performers grew up in a Las Vegas where they didn't have to accept segregation as the price of success. But the cost of Sammy's courage was high. Death threats arrived daily. Racist organizations called for boycotts of his shows. Some white fans turned against him, angry that their, quote, harmless entertainer had revealed himself to be a civil rights activist. Sammy never wavered. He continued to perform, continued to fight discrimination, continued to use his platform to demand equality. The boy who had grown up in vaudeville, accepting whatever scraps the entertainment industry offered, had become a man who demanded respect. The Flamingo pool incident also revealed something important about the nature of change. Segregation wasn't ended by legislation or court cases. It was ended by individuals who refused to accept it. When Sammy Davis Jr. jumped into that pool on July 18, 1961, he wasn't thinking about making history. He was just hot, tired of being treated as less than human. But sometimes history is made by people who simply refuse to accept the unacceptable. The pool at the Flamingo Hotel still exists today. Guests from all over the world swim in it without thinking about the barriers that once kept people out based on the color of their skin. Few of them know the story of the man who jumped into that water 60 years ago and changed everything. Few of them understand that their freedom to swim wherever they want was purchased with one man's courage to dive into forbidden waters. Sammy Davis Jr. died in 1990, but his legacy lives on in every integrated pool, every mixed-race family on vacation, every child who grows up believing that talent and character matter more than skin color. The water in that pool has been changed thousands of times since 1961, but the change that Sammy Davis Jr. created when he jumped in will last forever. Because sometimes, breaking down barriers is as simple as refusing to stay on your side of the line. Sometimes, revolution starts with a swim.